Hi, welcome to my video. I am Harry. 2 days ago, I opened my ChatGPT and I find out I can test all the plugins. So I tried one of them, and here is my first review of ChatGPT plugin. The first plugin I have used is AITickerChat. What it does, it can provide the information from SEC filings and public companies' earnings transcripts. Why I choose this one is because of my own curiosity. I know SEC filings really well, and I actually co-own a product named secdatabase.com, which provides a search engine for SEC documents. I also read a lot of transcripts from the earnings call. I find they are very useful information. However, it takes a lot of time. Sometimes I even think, how can I use the ChatGPT or AI technology today to help users easily access the tons of very important information from those large amounts of documents. I'm very motivated to see how this plugin works and how well it does. If you don't want to go through all the details and the questions I asked the plugin, you can go to the end of this video. I summarized my findings, and also I discussed why it appears to be this way. The first question I asked is about the compensation of Tim Cook. To my surprise, it answered the question really well. It gave me the direct answer about the compensation, including salary and bonus. It also added the footnotes to make the information complete. To my surprise, in the end, it added another URL. If we open that, we will find this is an SEC filing. It is the original place that has all the information. If we search for bonus, the first one we can see is Tim Cook's compensation. So the numbers are relatively accurate, although it's not the full picture. The total compensation is 98 million. That's much larger than what they reported, but not bad. At the same time, I asked for 2020, then I changed that to 2023. This one somehow is not the exact information. It also has the original document link. We can see this is actually the 2022 compensation, and we see the number, the stock awards in bonus. That's inaccurate. It says only 40 million, is 82 million actually. And this part is very accurate and very important, because the CEO's compensation usually has incentive based on performance. So it is 75 performance based and 25 time based. To compare that, actually in the previous year, the performance based is only 50%. This year in 2022, it changed to 75%. So this is a very important call out. For the first question, I'm very impressed. It gives you relatively accurate information, and it has the original link. If a person wants to find out the same information, it actually takes much longer. For someone really familiar with those documents, may shorten the time, but however, this speed is unbeatable. The next question I asked, how many shares of Apple stock does Tim Cook have? This is a big surprise to me. It failed to provide any information, and actually the link it offered does not have the right information. So this is not the right form to look for that information. The next question, the similar thing. I try to find out the latest insider trading Tim Cook has. Form 4 is the insider trading, and it usually has the last snapshot of the shares the person has. Turns out they don't have Form 4. That's quite a surprise, because this is a very commonly used form, and most SEC search engines provide that form. Then I shifted my topic to ask questions regarding to transcripts. The first question is about when is the last transcripts they have on Airbnb. This one they answered pretty well, and the data is very recent. At the same time, they summarize the main contents of these transcripts. I have read the transcripts the other day, and the CEO had said something really interesting about ChatGPT. I really want to share this with you guys. First thing he discussed is the limitation of ChatGPT in the current form. So even Airbnb has the early access to ChatGPT, and then in the last minute, they don't publish their plugin. The CEO provided some really insightful answer to that question. First is about the user experience. He pointed out that many questions in the travel are not search questions, but matching questions, where the answer depends on the user's preference. And to my very big surprise, the CEO said Airbnb was supposed to be the one of launch partners of the plugin in OpenAI ChatGPT, but in the last minute, they decided to withdraw this launch, so they didn't launch the plugin in ChatGPT. The last thing he called out is the innovation culture. Who will benefit the ChatGPT or AI in the short term and the long term? Is the company has the most innovative culture. That's very insightful, because we can imagine at today, most of the companies, most of the people do not anticipate the rise of ChatGPT. So everyone starts from square zero. The companies can innovate faster and has the innovative culture that will be the one who really leading in the AI era. Following up on that, I asked if Uber has discussed anything related to ChatGPT or AI during their latest phone calls. The answer was no, not discussing AI or not discussing anything related to ChatGPT. I am not sure if that's really true. They also say they can't find any discussion about AI or ChatGPT during Twilio's earnings call. At this point, I'm a little bit skeptical. Then I decided to ask a few simpler questions, like this one, risk factors of Twilio. Usually those risk factors is discussed in management discussion in Thank You. It's relatively easy to find. They got those simple ones covered. And then I just trying to find out something is guaranteed to be in the 10K. Number of employees HubSpot have. Not available. When is the last earnings call for Uber? Not available. How about Twilio? Not available. After some time, I come back to my computer and then ask almost very similar question again during Uber's latest earnings call. Can you summarize the key points from the analyst's question? Boom, they did such a good job to list out all the topics coming from the analysts. And I find one of them is related to AI, but in the beginning they say they don't find any discussion on AI in Uber's earnings call. That's a surprise. So I did a very similar thing, asked them to summarize their answer to the AI question. Okay, and then here we go. They have the AI question. Following up on that, I asked a few more similar questions for different companies. They answered really well. I tried Snowflake. What are the key topics from analyst questions? They have 10 points. And I have also reviewed the same transcripts. They are pretty much a good coverage, and also they provide a short answer to all those topics. Because I spent a lot of time reading those transcripts. However, each earnings call is 45 minutes to an hour, and is a lot of information. However, sometimes the answer from the CEO is just cookie cutter, some cliche. So I can ask the ChatGPT to summarize the topics they have discussed. And if I find something that's more interesting, I can ask the ChatGPT to provide more details for those topics. I believe that's the best use case I can find from the transcripts parts. Let me quickly summarize how I feel about this plugin. They did a fairly good job when dealing with earnings transcripts. However, when it comes to SEC filings, sometimes they can find the right documents. Sometimes they cannot. I am not sure the plugin really knows for what types of information they need to look for what types of SEC forms. When they find the right form, it did a better job when summarizing the text-based knowledge. It does not do a very good job in summarizing data based on tables. My last key observation: the results seems depending drastically on how the question is being asked. for the same thing, if I ask the same question differently, sometimes they find the right information, sometimes they could totally fail. Guiding AI, asking questions step by step, this technique still works for plugins. So let's talk about why it appears to be this way. Under the plugin, here is how it works from a high level. In the AI side, the ChatGPT will receive your question, and then they will determine whether this question should go to a certain plugin. Once it has been passed into a plugin, they need to match the information you are looking for to a certain API within the plugin. Then behind the API, they will try to find the document that's related to this query. And once they find the document, they need to find out the exact parts of this document and match this parts to the question. And then we pass this block of text or HTML back to AI, so to make a summarize to answer the question. That's how it works. Now we can understand better why this plugin works in a certain way. First is for mapping the information to a certain documents. This part has to be implemented by the plugin itself. It's not done by ChatGPT or OpenAI. And then find the right information is very difficult for SEC because SEC findings could easily go to 100 pages or even 1,000 pages for large companies like banks. On the contrary, for earnings, it's usually just one document and is text-based and is literally human conversation because it's a phone call transcript. It works perfectly well for ChatGPT. It's conversation data. And we also know in the SEC findings, many of the data is in table form. It is not text-based. So the ChatGPT sometimes understands the table if it is simple, sometimes simply does not. Now we briefly explained why it looks this way, and I really look forward for our implementation for future plugins. I think this is a very important learning. As my first review of a ChatGPT plugin, this is very helpful. Also helps us to understand how it works and to implement our own plugin. Okay, here is all the contents for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.